Arvind, it's great to have you here at Yahoo Finance Invest. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us here this afternoon. We've talked about so much here today when we talk about the state of the economy right now, investment in AI, the outcome, the election, obviously everything, all of that applying to IBM. So it's kind of tough to figure out where to start, but I think I'll start with the election because I think that touches on almost everything IBM maybe will be doing here over the next several years. I'm curious just how the results are influencing your strategy and how you're navigating the next 4 years.
Yes, Seana, first of all, it's great to be here and thank you for having me. Look, when I think about the election, one of the uncertainties that was weighing, I'd say, on the economy globally, if I go back 6 months ago, was elections. And what would the results be? And they could be of very different forms. That uncertainty is gone. Business does a lot better when uncertainty goes away. Two, I think that we are all hopeful that there is going to be a lot more innovation and there is going to be less regulation. Those are both good for business across the board. I always acknowledge we need some guardrails. I always think, at least in the United States, with our system of separation between the judiciary and the legislature, there'll be some guardrails. But I'd say the business community overall, and us especially, are excited that we think there will be tailwinds to the economy going into 25 and perhaps even more after that.
So then what does that look like? You mentioned one of the things in there is that maybe we could see a little bit more or lighter regulation than over the next 4 years. What does that specifically mean for IBM? Is it M&A? How do you plan then, or do you plan to kind of capture some of that?
Actually, the first and foremost is not about M&A. The first and foremost is business leaders, our clients, to be precise, have to make investments in CapEx and OpEx. If you think that the climate is going to be more certain for 4 years, the chances you're going to make those decisions quicker is higher. If they're going to make those decisions quicker, we'll tend to win. If we're going to win, then we are going to invest more because we want to participate in those victories. And so that drives the whole cycle upwards. I think that's number one. Then number two is, yes, if we have more certainty on the outcome, we are willing to more lean in even to things like M&A. And if the regulatory process and antitrust is going to be more certain, that allows you to take more risk in there. And so I think there's going to be a vector of positivity there as well. But it's really the former. I think people are underestimating how much more investment there is going to be, and that's then going to drive investment in those who can win from those CapEx spends.
So what does that mean for IBM then?
I think that the AI spending from our clients is going to go up. I think the automation spending is going to go up. If I predicted the labor demographics are going to get even worse, maybe there's some policy statements that imply that. Well, technology is a way to replace labor, so that means more technology will get deployed by our clients. And so those are the kinds of vectors that we are looking at to help accelerate our business. I also think that there is going to be more of an appetite for US technology globally, with maybe a couple of small exceptions. Maybe they're not so small, but those are already exceptions. I think with those put aside, I think there's going to be a lot more appetite to go invest in US technology from all over the globe.
And you have a very unique view. You have the services side of the business, also the product side of the business. I'm curious, how are you seeing that just in terms of priority of spend here from your business clients and how you see that shaping up here over the next several years?
So we have a software business that's about half our total business. We have a hardware business that's about 20%, and services about 30%. Software has been on fire. 22, 23, 24, and I expect it to accelerate going forward into 25 and 26. So that is very clear when you think about products. On services, given what I talked about uncertainty, there has been a slowdown in the second half of 24. I expect that'll last a little bit into 25 because people are going to be deciding what kind of projects they want to do. And unlike sort of CapEx spending in products which you can turn on and off at a switch, labor-based spending tends to be sort of slow on the way down, but then slower on the way up. I expect somewhere mid-year, as people begin to say, we want to do these big transformations, that's going to speed up also. But probably it goes through a little bit of a slowdown. Not anything negative, not anything catastrophic, but just a bit of a slowdown, I think, for a few more months.
Arvind, there certainly has been a lot of excitement surrounding your stock. Your shares aren't too far from an all-time high. You talk about the fact that there's a lot of momentum within IBM's business right now. I'm curious, how much of that do you see just in terms of continuing to drive that near-term momentum? How much of that do you see being cost-saving measures versus what you're seeing in terms of any incremental improvement that you're starting to see of revenue drivers and what that looks like?
Look, anybody who runs a business, cost saving is never going to get you a big return except for a very small amount of time. At the end of the day, the only thing that motivates our investors is going to be revenue growth, and if cash flow growth can be higher than revenue growth. Because that means you're taking share, that means you're vibrant, that's the best way of judging are the products and services you're offering attractive to the market. I think that is what has really driven the stock. If I go look at it over the past year, and it's been sort of 3 years of hard work to get there, but that's what has driven it. And that is what is going to drive it going forward. For example, in software, we printed 10% growth in the last quarter, similar in the last few quarters. 7% of that is organic, meaning it's what we built ourselves. 3% of that is from M&A. I think that's going to be the engine that keeps powering the stock going forward. If I look at our services business, this is going to be partly just in its own right, but more importantly, because it's an integrated business, it helps deploy software faster. It helps deploy our Red Hat software, it'll help deploy AI software, it helps our customers take much more advantage of the mainframe. That's really what the consulting business does. And I actually think that in a long-term vector, consulting taking more advantage of AI, where digital and AI workers are sitting side by side with human workers, is actually going to be a big motivator of both margin and demand in that part of the business.
Arvind, let's talk about your AI book of business because the numbers have been nothing short of impressive. You have 50% quarter-over-quarter growth that you saw within your AI book of business, right around $3 billion. I'm curious, where does IBM sit in relation to some of the other larger tech giants?
So one, we are not in a consumer business. So we have no particular desire to create a model or a set of applications that we put out on a website and go get subscribers and go get whether hundreds of millions or billions of people. That's just not our business model. We're a B2B company. Our clients are people like Bank of America or Verizon or Elevance or Aetna, et cetera. Those are our clients. So the AI we do is meant for enterprise. So that's kind of a first big difference. We both leverage other people's models, but we also build our own models. And you kind of ask the question, well, why do you build your own models? Because some of our clients would prefer to get indemnity. They would prefer to know there is no data of unknown origin in those models. And so in order to do all that, we have to look our clients in the eye and be able to give them those assurances, both in a contractual form and in an ethical form. Then we need to build our own models. But there are plenty of use cases where other models could also be useful. So we do an and. So we will work with Azure, we work with AWS, we work with Google, we work with all the big models that are out there. But we find that over half the demand comes for our own models because we offer those extra attributes. But we're not changing the multi-100 billion parameter models, what I'll call the extremely large models. Because even when we say small here, these are pretty large. I mean, by small, people talk about 30 billion parameters. 5 years ago, people would have started laughing at you if you did algorithms that are that big. So when we say small, it's more like 20, 30 billion parameter models that are great for a single task. I kind of say this a little bit, I'll say a little bit facetiously, but there is a lot of truth under it. If you have no idea what you're going to do, and you might be asking the model, please summarize an email, or please help compose an email, or translate a document from Finnish to French, or write me a haiku, or give me a small essay in the voice of Steinbeck, you probably need a very large model because you have no idea what it's going to do. If your question is simply, please read this document and tell me what are my 4 legal obligations, that is a much more precise and could be a much smaller model. We live in the latter world, not in the former world. So that's why we find that smaller models are as good. So you're not giving up anything on quality or accuracy. All you're doing is saying, can I run them a lot cheaper? So that's what we're after. By the way, just looking at our clients, I think customer experience, customer service, programming tasks, enterprise tasks, the ones that probably the audience finds a little boring and not so great to talk about, but there's a lot of money spent on them. Is it accounts receivable? Is it HR functions? Is it procurement? Is it supply chain? A not so random example, how many PFAS chemicals are in these 100,000 products that we make? Those are the kinds of questions that we love to answer using AI.
You know, Arvind, I was going through a number of recent analyst notes here over the last several weeks, and one of the notes that stuck out to me is from Jefferies Brenthil. He comes on Yahoo Finance's shows across the day quite frequently. And one of the things that he said is he's staying on the sidelines when it comes to IBM because he still has questions around the monetization of AI. What would your response be?
Well, I think $3 billion speaks for itself. That would be my first answer. And since that is an SEC reported number, those of you who report numbers know that those are some things that you're quite careful about. The 50% growth quarter on quarter that you mentioned, by the way, our number was 0 15 months ago. So this $3 billion book of business has been built up over 15 months. So I think those things speak to itself. I mean, look, I mean, with Jefferies or with Brett or with anybody else, I think in the past you could have dinged us that we were not able to monetize or convert a lot of our research into actual dollars. I think the last 3 years have been quite different. And I think if we begin to look at our track record there of what we've been able to monetize is different. So would I accept that criticism 10 years ago? Probably. Would I accept that criticism today? Probably not.
Does there, though, need to be more compelling use cases across the landscape here to justify some of the pricing and investment, do you think, within AI? Or are we there?
Look, I think that I use the analogy of the internet because I think that's the easiest way to think about these things. And people talk about, is this like the smartphone? No, it's not. Smartphone kind of went from 0 to 100 within 12 months, and then you were on a boom forever. If you look at the internet, I'd ask you the question, how many of you, most of you look way too young. Many of you probably don't even remember a company called Netscape. Netscape is what kind of brought the internet to people's attention. I'll call it attention because there was 10 years of work before that, but for the investment community, Netscape was 1995. That was the IPO, that was the boom. By the way, by 2000, it didn't exist. Let me point out. There are so many others I can go through that period. Excite, Inktomi, Fast Forward, you can go on and on. Now, there were many others who did exist, okay? eBay came out of that time period, so did Amazon. Just by the way, Facebook and Google are post that phenomenon, so they were not actually even existing. I think AI is going to be just like the internet. There is an initial boom. People were excited about what today you would call social media. Then there came the boom of the B2B and e-business and all of those things that followed sort of 3-4 years. And even if in the late 90s, people were wondering, is this useful for me? You know, I got so excited, but like a website and a browser, what the hell do I do with that? And then by 2001, 2002, people realized, oh my God, my cost of distribution is plummeting. Could I somehow connect my supply chain and my plants with inventory all the way out to a website, and suddenly distribution, which has been the cost of business for 100 years, becomes so much cheaper, and those who figured it out boomed. And you can see what has happened to the world of online commerce. It's already, 30% of the US, and most business-to-business commerce is done electronically. It's not really done in person anymore. So you take those things, and I kind of say, AI is going to play out like that. So I kind of react with, in the short term, are people saying, wait, it's already 2-3 years in, I'm not getting the return? Maybe. But this is one of those where 5 years from now, if you're not using it in every part of your business, I can look you in the eye and say, you're going to be fundamentally disadvantaged. I would assert that 5 years from now, those who use AI well will either have 10% more on the bottom line, and we know how the market will reward that, or you'll have revenue growth that is 10% faster than all your competitors, if I was to look at it that way. That, I think, is what you can see clearly.
Compelling use case. You talk about the increase in productivity. I think lots of questions about what ultimately that means then for the workforce. How do you see AI disrupting jobs?
Look, is there going to be some level of change to jobs? Absolutely. So in our own case, if I look at some of our HR functions, we need far fewer people in some, not in those who are giving cognitive help to their teams. So if you're advising somebody on the team makeup, on what kind of gaps you have, how people should be developed, that's very much human, and I think will remain human. But simple tasks, write me a letter that verifies my salary and title. Why do I need a human for that? Those tasks are going to get taken over by AI. When you put that all together, I think that means 5-6% churn in jobs. Well, 5-6% is less than half or churn in any case. So it's easy to absorb that much. And by the way, if we are more productive, I believe we'll get more market share, which means we're going to need a lot more people in sales, in client-facing roles, in engineering, and in all the tasks that really create value. So there will be shift, I think, at that rate, 5-6%, from more repetitive tasks to more value creation jobs. And that's what then we should do. What do? We try to upskill our people to be able to be ready for those jobs. So we put all of our people through AI training. We let them take advantage of how they think AI will impact their role. Mm-hmm. And there's excitement around it. I mean, over 80% of our people participate in those upskilling criteria.
Are you at all facing a talent shortage? And I bring that up in the context of obviously lots of focus around immigration policy, what that's going to look like under Trump. If we do see significant change, does that potentially exacerbate the issue that's already at hand?
So there's always 2 to 3 ways to look at it. Number one, I'll answer directly. Is there a lack of talent, more than the word talent shortage? Absolutely. I mean, I don't need to say that. You all know it. Cyber, 500,000 jobs are left unfulfilled. In programming, we can debate, is it 3 million, 4 million, 5 million jobs that are left unfulfilled? So I think for high-skilled jobs, there is a severe shortage of talent. I think we should accept that. We shouldn't debate that. I go upstate New York, people there talk about not being able to get enough workers to do jobs on farms and factories and to service the towns. So it's more than even our high-skilled jobs. There's a lack of talent. Now, it's more than immigration. The entire world, other than Africa, is now losing people. Right? China's losing people, South Korea is losing people, Japan is losing people, Europe is losing people because birth rates have come down. If birth rates have come down, there is going to be a lack of people on the globe, put aside the US. So we all have to learn how to leverage technology to do some of the jobs that people used to do in the past. I think there's no way around that. Then you have to then leverage talent where it is. So you can do some things offshore, you can do some things onshore. There are many things that will always remain onshore, but then how do you get more out of the people, and how can you punt the tasks that don't need people to machines?
Arvind, there's much more, a couple of follow-ups I want to ask you, but we're running out of time, and I quickly want to get to just your personal story, because you started with IBM decades ago, worked your way up through the company, and I'm curious what you've made of the evolution of IBM during that time, and what makes you so excited about the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So Seana was referring to, I've had more than 3 decades at the company. I know that's unusual nowadays, but I've loved it. Look, it's very simple. You got to go back to your core value. What is our core value? We deploy technology that improves our client's business. So if you go back to that core, then you say, obsess about the client, focus on innovation. We can't do everything. We have picked AI and hybrid cloud as the vectors we're going to compete in right now. Put all your eggs in those baskets, and then produce great technology and great experts that can help our clients deploy those two to benefit their business. It's really kind of that simple. Not so simple to do, but simple to say.
You can say. And your smile says it all, the excitement on your face. Arvind, it was great to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
It.